The message came while I was smoothing tissue paper over my dress, thinking about centerpieces and first dances. 2 days before my son's wedding, when everything in my world was folded neatly into navy blue fabric and pearl buttons, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. I wish I had. Instead, I wiped my hands, picked up the phone, and read the words that made my blood run cold. Don't go to the wedding. Your daughter-in-law planned everything. She's not who you think she is. I remember just staring at those lines, my reflection warped in the glass of the picture frame above my dresser. For a moment, I thought it had to be some cruel prank. At 64, you'd think you've seen enough of life not to be rattled by a text message. But that night in my quiet little house with the air conditioner humming and my son's big day hanging like a lantern in my mind, I felt a fear I hadn't felt since I stood in a hospital hallway and watched doctors fail to save my husband. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang once, twice, then a woman answered in a low, tense voice. "Mrs. Richards," she asked with a slight southern lilt that wrapped around my name. "Yes, who is this?" I said, already annoyed with myself for engaging. "Please don't hang up," she rushed. "This is going to sound insane, but you cannot let your son marry that woman." My mouth went dry. "Excuse me. Who are you?" She exhaled shakily. "Your future daughter-in-law isn't who she says she is. Romy isn't her real name, and she's already married. Has been for 3 years. I almost laughed then. It sounded like something from an over-the-top TV drama you leave playing in the background while you fold laundry. "That's impossible," I snapped. "You're lying." "I wish I was," she whispered. "Listen to me carefully, Mrs. Richards. Romy's real name is Rachel Morrison, and she married my brother Thomas in Atlanta 3 years ago. They never divorced. She left him cleaned out and moved on to your son." I sank into the kitchen chair like someone had kicked it out from under me. The wedding dress I'd just bought slid from my lap and puddled on the floor, navy fabric pooling like spilled ink. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my hands trembling around the phone. "You won't even tell me your name." There was a pause, then a ragged breath on the line. "Because if she finds out I called you, she'll disappear and take everything your son has already signed over to her. And trust me, there's a lot. The house, the business shares, bank accounts. She's been working on him for months. My brother fell for the same routine. Sweet, helpless, needing protection. By the time Thomas realized what was happening, she'd transferred almost everything into joint accounts, then into her name only. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. My son Darren, who still apologized if he was 5 minutes late for dinner, signing away his life because some pretty woman tilted her head and said she needed him. "Where is your brother now?" I asked, quietly, already fearing the answer. When she spoke again, her voice sounded like it had been scraped raw. "Thomas took his own life 6 months after she cleaned him out. He lost everything. His business, his house, his savings, all of it gone." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself rooted, staring at the grooves in the wood as if they could anchor me to reality. I had spent years mopping floors and changing bedpans on double shifts to raise my boy. I had held his hand at his father's funeral, promised him I'd get him through college somehow, watched him build a successful accounting practice at 32. And now a stranger was telling me that the woman he was going to marry in 48 hours might be planning to erase his life the way she had erased another man's. "What kind of proof do you have?" I managed. "Marriage certificate, photos, bank records. I have copies of everything the woman said, but I need time to get them to you safely. She can't know I'm involved." "I still don't even know your name," I whispered. There was another pause, then she said, "Sarah Morrison and Mrs. Richards. Be very careful around Romy from now on. Don't let her know you suspect anything. She's more dangerous than she looks." The line went dead. I tried calling back. It went straight to a generic voicemail with no name, just that empty, mechanical voice. For hours afterward, I paced my small living room, listening to the clock tick and replaying every moment I'd spent with the woman I thought would be my daughter-in-law. The the way she redirected conversations away from family stories, the headaches that appeared whenever I asked for time alone with Darren, the odd way her accent came and went. The more I walked that narrow path between the sofa and the window, the more I realized how little I actually knew about her. By the time the sky outside my curtains had turned from soft blue to deep midnight, I hadn't found a single solid memory that made me feel safe. Only questions, only holes. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Sarah Morrison's voice telling me about her brother's suicide. By sunrise, when pale light slipped into my kitchen and lit up the fallen navy dress on the floor, I knew one thing with painful clarity. I needed the truth no matter how much it hurt, and I had less than 2 days before my son walked down an aisle toward a woman who might be planning his death. By the time morning light pushed through my curtains, my nerves felt like exposed wires. I brewed coffee I didn't drink, tried to eat toast that turned to dust in my mouth, and kept telling myself that it was all a misunderstanding, that I would laugh about this someday. Then a little after 12 p.m., my phone rang and Darren's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it, imagining all the terrible ways this conversation could go if I blurted everything out. I forced my voice to sound normal when I answered, "Hey, honey." He sounded tired, thinner somehow through the phone. "Hey, Mom, just calling to confirm the rehearsal dinner time. Romy's freaking out about the seating chart." I swallowed, trying to keep my tone light. "Wedding stress will do that. Is everything okay?" He sighed. "Just a lot of last-minute details. Actually, she was wondering if you could do us a favor. Could you pick up her aunt's dress from the dry cleaner? Her aunt flew in from Nashville this morning and doesn't have a car." Something cold moved through my chest. "Of course," I said, reaching for a pen with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "What name is it under Morrison?" he said casually. "First name Rachel. Her aunt gets confused easily, so Romy just uses her own first name on stuff. Easier that way." The pen slipped in my fingers. Morrison. Rachel. The same name the woman on the phone had used. "Mom, you still there?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice coming out pinched. "Just writing it down. Morrison. Got it." When we hung up, I sat there for a full minute staring at the notepad where I'd written that name in shaky letters, as if seeing it on paper might somehow make it less real. The dry cleaner was one of those small corner shops with flickering fluorescent lights and a bell that chimed weakly when you walked in. I could hear my heart beating in my ears as I approached the counter. "I'm here to pick up a dress for Morrison," I said. "First name Rachel." The teenage girl at the register barely looked up. One sec she mumbled, disappearing behind the racks of plastic-covered clothes. She reappeared with a garment bag and laid it on the counter. As I reached for it, my eyes snagged on the receipt stapled to the plastic. Ordered 6 months ago. Paid with a card in the name Rachel Morrison. No visiting aunt, no recent arrival from Nashville. She had been using that name all along, hidden in plain sight. I drove to Darren's house with that garment bag on the passenger seat and dread coiled tight in my stomach. I knew where he kept the spare key. I'd helped him pick out the lock when he bought the place 5 years earlier, back when it had been our little victory over the life insurance money from his father's death and my overtime pay. The house felt unfamiliar when I stepped inside, like someone had taken my son's life and redecorated it in a stranger's image. Romy's clothes spilled from the closet, expensive fabrics and designer labels that didn't match Darren's modest accountant income. The kitchen counters were crowded with gleaming appliances I knew he couldn't have afforded without help. I moved through the rooms like a ghost opening drawers and cabinets, my breath shallow, my ears straining for the sound of a car in the driveway. In the guest room, where Romy supposedly stayed when she worked late, I found a manila folder tucked under a stack of magazines in the nightstand. My fingers trembled as I slid it out and opened it. A marriage certificate from Fulton County, Georgia. 3 years ago. The bride's name, Rachel Morrison. The groom, Thomas Morrison. The photo was a punch to the gut. Her hair was darker, cut shorter, but those green eyes, that heart-shaped face, that smile, I knew her. My future daughter-in-law wearing another man's ring. Behind the certificate were bank statements showing large transfers from Thomas's accounts into joint ones, then into accounts in Rachel's name only. Property deeds with his house and business quietly shifting into her ownership. And then I saw the death certificate. Thomas Morrison, suicide by overdose, dated 8 months earlier. My vision blurred. I took photo after photo of each page with my phone, desperate to record everything before anyone walked in. At the back of the folder, newer documents bore my son's name. Mortgage papers showing he had refinanced the house and added Rachel Morrison as a co-owner. Bank forms making her a joint account holder with full withdrawal rights. Life insurance policies naming her as sole beneficiary. The pattern was there, cold and methodical, like a blueprint for destruction. I was sliding the documents back into place when I heard a car door slam outside. Panic shot through me. I shoved the folder into the drawer, grabbed the dry cleaning bag like a lifeline, and hurried back to the living room just as the front door opened. Marlene Romy called, her voice warm and bright as ever. "What are you doing here?" She stepped into the room, glowing and effortless in a sundress, her hair perfectly arranged despite the July heat. "Darren asked me to drop off your aunt's dress," I said, holding up the garment bag and praying she couldn't see how my hands shook. She smiled, moving closer, her perfume wrapping around me like a soft hand over my mouth. "You are such an angel," she said. "Aunt Rachel will be so grateful. She's been so worried about having something appropriate to wear." The lie slid out of her with terrifying ease. I forced myself to hold her gaze. "Where is your aunt staying?" I asked lightly. "At the Marriott downtown," she replied without missing a beat. "She doesn't travel much, so she wanted somewhere familiar." My eyes flicked past her to the kitchen where a stack of papers lay on the counter on top, unmistakable even from here, the heading of a life insurance policy with Darren's name on it and a shockingly large number beneath. "You look pale," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on my arm as she guided me toward the door. "Are you all right?" I managed a tight smile. "Just wedding jitters," I answered. "You know how mothers are. Tomorrow will be perfect." She said, her green eyes impossibly gentle. "Darren is so lucky to have you." The words felt like a threat. Hours later, as the sky bled into nighttime, I found myself walking through Riverside Park toward the old bandstand for a meeting. I wasn't sure I was brave enough to attend. It was nearly 10 p.m. The park nearly empty, the streetlight above the bandstand flickering like a heartbeat. A woman stepped out of the shadows, early 30s, tired eyes, short brown hair. "Mrs. Richards," she asked. "I'm Sarah Morrison." I gripped my purse tighter, feeling the weight of the photos and documents inside. "Everything you told me was true," I said, "and I found more." She sat beside me on the worn bench, looking smaller than she'd sounded on the phone. "Then we don't have much time," she said quietly, "because Rachel never leaves loose ends. If she knows you're onto her, she won't run. She'll accelerate." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, then something small and metallic that glinted in the weak light, a digital recorder. "This," she said, placing it gently in my hand, "is her voice, planning what she calls the Thomas solution for your son. And once you hear it, you'll understand exactly how much danger he's in." The small recorder felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of everything I didn't want to believe. I pressed play, and the sound of Romy's calm, deliberate voice filled the quiet park. The Thomas solution worked perfectly. Quick, clean, no questions asked, she said almost conversationally as if discussing a recipe. But I learned my lesson about timing. 6 weeks was too soon. This time, I'll wait at least 3 months, maybe 4. Let everyone see how happy we are first. The recording clicked off, leaving only the whisper of night air and my ragged breathing. "Oh my God," I whispered, pressing a hand to my mouth. Sarah's expression was hollow, all grief and exhaustion. "I told you she never changes. Every time it's the same pattern, she isolates them, drains them dry, and then removes them when they've outlived their usefulness." She opened the manila envelope and began spreading documents across the bench. "I've spent months tracking her movements," she said. After Thomas died, I dug through his accounts, traced the money, the life insurance, the property deeds. That's how I found the others. I looked down at the photos, smiling men in engagement pictures, wedding receptions, vacations, different faces, same woman. These 3 all died within 2 years of marrying her. Sarah continued. Richard Caldwell in Birmingham, Marcus Webb and Charlotte David Chen in Tampa, 2 suicides, 1 car accident, all ruled tragedies, all insured for hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's been at this for over 15 years, moving state to state, changing her name, her hair, her accent. My brother Thomas was the 4th. The air felt thin in my lungs. How many people know about this? I asked. No one who's lived long enough to matter, she said bitterly, and she's not alone. There's someone helping her, a man named Michael Torrance. He's a licensed paramedic, provides access to drugs fakes, overdose scenes, stages accidents, every time it looks clean. I studied one of the documents showing a house transfer into Rachel Morrison's name, then another with Darren's signature on it. She's already done it, I murmured. He's signed everything over. His house, his insurance. She's just waiting for the right moment. Exactly, Sarah said. The wedding is her safety net. Once she's legally his wife, no one will question a thing if something happens to him. She'll play the grieving widow, collect everything, and disappear again. I gripped the recorder, my knuckles white. Then we have to stop it, we will, Sarah said. But it has to be done carefully. If we confront her too soon, she'll vanish. If we wait too long, your son could die. Her eyes softened as she looked at me. You need to talk to him before the ceremony. Make him listen to the recording. He won't want to believe it, but hearing her voice, it's the only thing that can break through her control. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, staring at the photos and listening to that recording over and over. Each time Romy's voice filled the room, I felt my stomach twist tighter. The casual confidence, the way she said, "We like this," was just another job. By 7 a.m., I knew I couldn't wait for the wedding. I had to face Darren before it was too late. The morning sun was already glaring through the windows when I pulled up in front of his house. His car was in the driveway, so was hers. My pulse thudded painfully as I rang the bell. Romy answered, radiant in a silk robe, her hair in curlers, humming softly to herself. "Marlene," she said brightly. "You're here early. We weren't expecting anyone for another couple of hours." Her voice was warm, honey, her smile effortless. "I need to talk to Darren," I said, forcing steadiness into my tone. "It's urgent." Her eyes flickered just slightly, then she stepped aside. "Of course." "He's upstairs getting dressed. Come in." I walked into the living room where vases of fresh flowers lined every surface. A stack of wrapped wedding gifts gleamed under the soft music coming from hidden speakers. Everything smelled of roses and lemon polish, too perfect, too calm. She gestured toward the couch. "Coffee. You look tired." "No," I said quickly. "I just need to see Darren." She tilted her head with that practiced sympathy. "Wedding day nerves?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. I could feel my heart hammering as she called up the stairs. "Darren, your mother's here." He appeared a moment later, still in his undershirt and dress pants, smiling faintly. "Mom, everything okay?" "We need to talk privately," I said. "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Romy." He replied, his voice gentle, but firm. "We're getting married in 5 hours. That's exactly what I need to talk to you about." My voice shook. "She's already married, Darren. She has been for 3 years. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the tick of the wall clock. Darren blinked confused, then frowned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Romy's expression was perfection. Wide eyes, hand to her mouth, a step backward like a wounded actress. "Marlene, I don't understand. Why would you say something like that?" I pulled the marriage certificate from my purse and held it out. "Her real name is Rachel Morrison. She married Thomas Morrison in Atlanta. Look at the photo." Darren took it, his brow furrowed as he examined it. I watched his color fade as he recognized her face, even with the darker hair. "This is fake," he said, but his voice wavered. "Someone's trying to sabotage us." Then explain this, I said, thrusting the bank statements and property records toward him. And this Thomas Morrison's death certificate, suicide by overdose, just like she planned for you. Romy's tears came on cue, perfect shimmering drops that slid down her cheeks. How could you, she whispered. On our wedding day of all days, Darren, this is cruel. Listen to this, I said, fumbling with the recorder. I hit play. Her voice filled the room again, the same smooth, calm tone, describing the Thomas solution, the timing, the plan. Darren froze, his face draining of color as he listened. When it ended, the world seemed to stop breathing. Romy's sobbing cut off. She lifted her chin, and in an instant the mask slipped away. The softness vanished, replaced by something sharp and reptilian. You have no idea what you've just done, she said, her voice low and stripped of all emotion. Gone was the sweet girl's tone. What came out now was pure ice. Darren stared at her disbelief, giving way to horror. Romy, what is this? She laughed, a dry, chilling sound. Your mother is persistent, I'll give her that. More so than Thomas's family was. The words hit like a physical blow. You admit it? He asked. Was married? She corrected coolly. Thomas is dead, so technically I'm a widow. She moved toward the kitchen with slow, deliberate steps. Though I suppose bigamy charges could still be filed if someone really wanted to get messy. The house, Darren said hoarsely. The bank accounts, the insurance policies. You made me sign everything over to you. I made you secure our future. She said, her tone almost pitying. Everything I did was for us. For us, I whispered. You were planning to kill him. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made my blood turn to ice. Eventually. But I was going to wait longer this time. She turned toward the doorway and called softly, Michael, come in. And that was when I saw him, a tall man in a paramedic uniform, stepping out of the hallway, holding a syringe filled with clear liquid. We need to go, he said calmly. Now. For a second, everything froze, the white flash of the syringe, Darren's shocked face, the hum of the music still playing softly in the background, like it belonged to another world. Then reality crashed in. Michael, Romy said, her voice smooth and steady. This has gotten too complicated. I realized then that they'd planned this moment, not just the wedding, not just the lie, this exact scenario. The man's uniform was real. The badge, the patches, even the small hospital logo on his chest pocket. He could walk into any home in that outfit and no one would question him. Who would doubt a paramedic responding to an emergency call, she said, almost proudly turning her cold green eyes toward me. 2 overdoses in one house. A grieving bride. Such a tragedy. Darren stepped in front of me, his voice shaking but loud. You're not going anywhere. Actually, we are. Romy replied softly, and if you're smart, you'll make this easy. She nodded to Michael, who moved closer, the needle glinting in his hand. The syringe contains a blend of fentanyl and midazolam, she said matter-of-factly, as if reciting a recipe. Quick, painless. Your mother will lose consciousness first, then you. It'll look like she gave it to you out of guilt, then took her own life. I could barely breathe. My son's hand reached behind him, gripping mine tightly. You won't get away with this, he said. Romy tilted her head, her smile patient and almost amused. Of course we will. Your mother called earlier, remember, upset, rambling about some conspiracy. She said she was coming over. When she arrived, she became violent. I'll tell them I tried to calm her down. Michael arrived too late. Her confidence was terrifying, a killer rehearsing a story she'd perfected 12 times before. You killed Sarah, didn't you? I said suddenly. She warned me you'd try this. Romy blinked, then smiled faintly as if acknowledging a well-played move. Sarah Morrison died in a car accident 3 days ago, she said evenly. It's tragic. She was so distraught about her brother's death that she wasn't paying attention to the road. My heart dropped. You killed her. Michael handled it, she said, glancing at him fondly. He's very good with cars. Michael gave a small, almost bashful shrug, the syringe still steady in his hand. Romy, he murmured, we should go. Now. In a minute, she said, "I think we deserve closure." My mind was a blur of noise, fear and prayer, but one clear thought cut through it. If we die here, she'll do it again. I needed to act. Without thinking, I lunged for my purse, yanking out my phone and slamming the emergency call button. The ringtone was loud in the silence. 911, what's your emergency? Came the operator's voice. Help, I gasped. 23 Maple Drive. They're trying to kill us. Rachel Morrison is a murderer. What the operator said sharply. Repeat that address. 23 Maple Drive, I screamed as Michael lunged. Darren tackled him just as the syringe flew from his hand and skittered across the hardwood floor. The two of them crashed into the side table, shattering glass, scattering wedding gifts and petals everywhere. Drop it, I heard Darren yell. Get off him! Romy spun toward the kitchen, her face twisted with fury, and grabbed a knife from the counter. You ruined everything, she screamed. 30 years of planning, and you... She stopped catching herself, breathing hard, regaining that eerie calm. Do you have any idea what I've built? She said, her voice low, trembling with rage. 12 perfect deaths, 12 fortunes, and I was going to disappear after this one. You just had to interfere. The wail of sirens filled the air, faint but growing. I clutched the phone to my chest, shouting to the operator, "They're here, please hurry." Darren and Michael were grappling near the doorway, the paramedic's hand reaching desperately toward the fallen syringe. "Romy, we have to go," he yelled. But Romy wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on me, wild and bright with hatred. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You've cost me everything." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "I've saved my son." Police lights flashed through the front windows as tires screeched to a stop outside. "Drop the weapon!" a voice shouted from the doorway. For a heartbeat, I thought she might fight, that she'd lunge and force them to shoot her. But then something inside her seemed to collapse. The knife slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Officers swarmed the room, forcing her to the ground, cuffing her hands behind her back. Michael tried to run, but they caught him halfway through the backyard gate. The room filled with noise commands, radio chatter, the rustle of evidence bags. And in the middle of it all, Darren and I stood frozen, surrounded by the wreckage of what should have been his wedding day. Flowers still filled the vases. The tuxedo hung neatly upstairs. The music was still playing softly, absurdly, as if mocking the chaos. Detective Williams, a woman with kind eyes and calm authority, approached me gently. "Ma'am, you're safe now. We've got them both." My voice came out as a whisper. She said she killed 12 men. The detective nodded grimly. "We're already coordinating with other departments. What you and your son did here may have just exposed one of the largest serial fraud and murder cases in recent history." Darren sat down heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I almost married her," he whispered. "I almost signed my own death warrant." I sat beside him, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "But you didn't," I said softly. "You're alive. That's what matters." As the officers escorted Rachel Morrison, Rachel Stevens, as we would later learn, out the door in handcuffs, she looked back at me. Her smile was gone, her eyes empty, but her voice was still calm. "You have no idea what you've cost me." "I know exactly what I've cost you," I said quietly. "My son's life." And for the first time in 2 days, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. 6 months later, I sat in a wooden bench inside a federal courtroom, the air cold and still, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The woman once known as Romy Rachel Morrison, Rachel Stevens, whatever name she'd chosen to wear like a mask, stood motionless as the judge read out her sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. 12 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bigamy. Her face was unreadable, her green eyes dull now under the fluorescent lights. The sound of the gavel cracked like a gunshot, and with it came the final confirmation that the nightmare was over. Darren sat beside me, his hand over mine, steady and warm. Around us were the families of her other victims, men she had charmed, married, isolated, and destroyed. I saw their faces a collage of grief and relief, the quiet strength of people who had finally been believed after years of wondering why their sons, brothers, or fathers had died. Mrs. Chen, whose son David had been found dead in Tampa. Marcus Webb's sister, her voice shaking as she read her statement. Each told the same story in different words, a woman who had entered their loved one's life like sunlight and left like a storm, taking everything that mattered. When it was my turn to speak, my knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand. "You tried to take the most precious thing in my life," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. "My son trusted you completely. He would have done anything you asked because he believed you loved him. You used that trust as a weapon. You took the best parts of people, their kindness, their hope, and you turned them into tools for murder." Rachel didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead as if I were nothing more than another line on a list she'd already finished crossing out. "But you failed," I continued, "because my son is alive, because someone finally stopped you, and because every family in this room now knows the truth about who you are." I sat down shaking and Darren's hand tightened around mine. After the sentencing, we walked out of the courthouse together. Reporters called our names, cameras, flashing microphones thrust forward, but we didn't answer. We just kept walking. When we reached the car, Darren leaned against the door and let out a long breath. "How do you feel?" I asked softly. He thought about it for a moment, then said, "Empty," but in a good way, like something heavy finally got lifted off me. I understood. Healing doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it's just the absence of terror. That afternoon, we drove to the small cemetery just outside the city where Sarah Morrison was buried next to her brother Thomas. 2 headstones side by side surrounded by wildflowers someone had planted in defiance of the harsh wind. I knelt, placing fresh white roses between them. "She saved your life," I said quietly. Darren nodded. "She saved more than that," he said. "She gave every family she couldn't save a chance at peace." For a while, we stood there in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees. When we finally turned to leave, I felt something lighter in my chest, as if Sarah's courage was still somewhere near us, lingering like sunlight through the clouds. The investigations had revealed everything. Rachel Stevens had been running her scheme for more than 15 years, moving across states under different names, targeting men with businesses, assets, or inheritances. Her accomplice, Michael Torrance, the paramedic who nearly killed us, had confessed to staging overdose scenes and car crashes, trading guilt for a lighter sentence. He was serving 25 years. Rachel's empire built on lies and blood was gone. Every stolen dollar, every piece of property had been seized and redistributed to her victims' families. Darren had reclaimed his house, his business, his accounts. But most of all, he'd reclaimed himself. We began a new ritual Sunday dinners at my house. Simple meals, laughter that felt fragile at first, but grew stronger each week. One evening, as the roast finished in the oven, Darren set 2 glasses of iced tea on the porch table. "I've been thinking about dating again," he said, half smiling. My heart skipped, but before I could speak, he laughed softly. "Not anytime soon, Mom, and definitely not without your approval and a full background check." I laughed too, though the sound carried more relief than humor. "That's probably wise," I said. He nodded. "My therapist says it's good that I'm even thinking about it. She says trust isn't the problem. It's forgetting to listen to the voice that tells you something's wrong." He looked at me, then his eyes clear for the first time in months. "You listened to yours. You saved me." The sun sank low behind the trees, turning the sky gold and pink. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid of the future. "You know," I said quietly, "I almost didn't push. There were moments when I thought maybe I should let you make your own mistakes." Darren smiled faintly. "What stopped you?" I looked at him, my son, alive and whole, and thought of the years I'd spent fighting for him, from scraped knees to heartbreaks to the brink of murder. Because some mistakes I said you don't get to recover from, and because sometimes protecting someone means being willing to let them hate you for it. We sat there until the stars came out, the quiet hum of summer around us. The nightmare was over. Rachel Stevens would never hurt anyone again. The other families would finally have justice. And my son, my boy, who had almost become her next obituary, was free. I reached over and took his hand. "I love you," he said softly. "I love you too, sweetheart," I whispered. The porch light flickered on, casting a soft glow over us, and for once it didn't feel ominous. Just warm. Just home. Thank you for listening to our story. If you were here until the end, I'd love to know where you're watching from, your city, your country, anywhere in the world. Stories like this remind us that love, no matter how terrifying the world becomes, is still the most powerful weapon we have. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place. I'll be reading every one of them.